Welcome to the Embodied Mystic podcast, where we explore the path of feminine awakening and luscious womanhood. Together we'll be diving into topics like sacred sexuality, feminine embodiment, spiritual healing, and soulful relationships. I'm your host, Tamar Raphael, tantric mentor and Aries hype girl, here to guide you back to the temple of your body and fall in love with being a woman. I look forward to journeying together. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to another episode of the Embodied Mystic podcast. And if you're new here, welcome. It's so lovely to be here with you. I'm Tamar Raphael. I'm a sacred sexuality coach, tantric mentor, rebirthing breath worker, body worker, and guide to help you living your most juicy, luscious, divine, feminine life. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new, come and say hi over on Instagram. My handle is at Tamar__Raphael. So it's at TAMAR__RAPHAEL. I love connecting with you in the DMs. It always makes my day to receive a message from you. So you are so welcome to slide into my DMs. It always feels really good to me to actually just feel and see the faces of those that I'm connecting to through the podcast, because it's like I record this, I put this out, and the only way that I actually know who's listening is if you come and say hi. So if you connect with this episode, if you're feeling the vibes, come say hi on Instagram. It's just my favorite. How was Scorpio season for you? Oh my gosh, it felt like a really, really big one. I'm personally so relieved that we're in Sagittarius season now, which is a much more fun, vibrant, alive, adventurous kind of energy. I was listening to one of my favorite astrology podcasts called Cosmic RX Radio, and the host Maddie Murphy called this the Sacred Party Girl season, which I love. And actually on the day that this podcast comes out, it's Sagittarius Sun and Gemini Moon, and this axis is super chatty, super outgoing, wise, loves fun, loves freedom. So it's a vibe. It's a really juicy, yummy, fun vibe that we're heading into. So yay! So we are officially stepping into holiday season. I'm sure you're probably seeing a lot of twinkling Christmas lights where you are. Where I am here in London, it's getting dark so early, and I'm really making the most of it. I haven't spent winter in Europe for many years, so I'm really enjoying all the twinkling lights. I'm lighting lots of candles. I've made the lighting in my room super sweet, and yeah, it's just feeling really nostalgic and lovely. So I hope you're somewhere warm. Hope you've got your cozies out if it's cold where you are, and you are just nesting in this sweet festive holiday season energy. I just wanted to take a moment here with you now to just really, really celebrate us all here and this podcast. I am feeling so excited about what's happening here and what's to come. If you've been following the show and you're connected on Instagram, you probably saw that there was a little bit of a kerfuffle with the pod. It actually got removed by Spotify and iTunes for a few days, which was, oh my God, it was so crazy. It was definitely a big moment. So basically there was this whole copyright thing that I was dealing with because there's a woman in the US who has trademarked the name The Embodied Mystic. And we were going back and forth for a few months. And yeah, sadly, she was quite aggressive with this whole thing. And she kind of campaigned to Spotify and to iTunes to have the pod taken down. And even though I'm like in the midst of rebranding, the pod did get taken down for a few days. And I'm just so relieved that we're back. You might have noticed that the podcast, the name of it, the technical name of it right now is the EM podcast. And it's basically that so that it can stay up and not infringe on her trademark while I am getting this rebrand all sorted. I got a really big spank on the bum from the universe with this. And so I am 1000% trademarking the new name, and I'm going to basically wait until I share the rebrand. I'm going to wait for that trademark to be approved and for it all to be legit before I release the whole new identity of the pod, which I am so excited about. I feel so grateful actually for this like little redirection. It's feeling really, really good. So just wanted to kind of like keep you in the loop about that because it's been cray-cray. The whole thing with the podcast name was just, it was so wild, and it still remains so wild to me because this little podcast, it's such a small operation. Like for me, it's a lot of work, but I'm just one person. And yeah, I want to really, really celebrate because we have reached over 100 subscribers on the pod, which I am so, so overjoyed about. I want to thank you so much for being here. If you're a subscriber, your support means the world. And yeah, just in the world of like growing an audience, doing this kind of thing, reaching 100 subscribers for a podcast, it's meant to be one of the hardest. Like they say, the first 100 subscribers for your podcast, and also on YouTube, the first 1,000 subscribers. It's the hardest. Like it's the hardest when you're really tiny and you're just starting out. So I just wanted to really thank you from the bottom of my heart for you being here. Like I'm just so in love with this little community. I'm in love with the conversations that we have on the gram, and yeah, through this podcast I've really been blessed to connect with some of the most amazing women I know, and I just wanted to let you know that my jaw is on the floor about the amazing guests that we have coming on the show in the next couple of months. I've honestly had to pinch myself because these are some of the women that I've been like just really praying to chat with and just really like admiring the frequency on and really desiring to bring some of their wisdom to your ears. And so I'm just so over the moon that these conversations are happening. So stay tuned. If you want to be the first to know when they come out, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast, whether it's on Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you're listening. We also share the podcast on YouTube, and occasionally those are video podcasts with guests. So yeah, when you subscribe, you'll get a notification as soon as the new episode is published each week. So definitely do that if you want to be the first to know when these come out. And I also want to welcome you to YouTube, which is such a vibe. My YouTube channel is really, really fun. There are some super interesting conversations happening. I had a video go viral, and it's really interesting to hear like some of the things that people have to say about sexuality and relationships. So you are so welcome to join that conversation. I would absolutely love to see you there. Funnily enough, my audience is like very male on YouTube, so I would actually love to kind of like shift that and bring more sisters to YouTube, because as you know, this podcast is for women. And talking about women, this episode is all about pleasure-led business for feminine spiritual entrepreneurs. I know that so many of you listening to this podcast are incredible spiritual business women. You've got incredible gifts and talents. Maybe you're an amazing healer or an oracle or a priestess. I tend to spend time with women like this, so I know that there are many of you out there like that. And if you've been curious about how to really grow your business and how to really create an abundant lifestyle and like a reciprocal energy in your work, because I know that healers and, really empathic, sensitive women have so much to give because we feel so much and we just really want to give. We just really want to support the world. We want to support our community. And at times that can mean being depleted and not feeling that kind of aligned reciprocal exchange. So yeah, I've really found that like this is the question on so many women's lips in the spiritual community. It's like how to thrive in your spiritual business, and especially how to stay in your ooey-gooey, squishy, feminine softness, that really like beautiful, luscious energy that's really embodied, that we know on this podcast is so important. We're like, how do we stay in that and still thrive in our business? If you're curious about that, this episode is for you. This topic has felt so hot for me as I've been just really pouring myself into my business and subsequently found myself so much more in my masculine energy and actually feeling quite energetically depleted by that. I was so thrilled to welcome conscious marketing expert Allison Canales, who embodies the perfect balance between girl boss and girl moss. I hope you've seen that meme, the girl moss meme. It's like this woman just like dissolving into the ground, and the text is something like, okay, we're done with our girl boss era. Now we want to be in our girl moss era. So Allison is just such a wonderful embodiment of being the perfect balance. She's also a new sister of mine, and it was just such a joy to have her on. So yeah, on this episode, we talk about being in service. We talk about how viewing marketing as a form of artistry can make us feel more fulfilled in our business. We talk about whether we should get a job on the side versus going all in. We talk about why feminine women in business particularly struggle so much with marketing and why it's all about being seen. We're talking about avoiding burnout and doing business the sustainable and nourished way, intuitive launching. We talk about the rollercoaster of spiritual entrepreneurship, and Allison answers the question, do you need a big social media following to have a successful business? Allison Canales is a conscious marketing and creative strategist guiding leaders to create an empowered relationship with social media and fall in love with marketing. Her work supports leaders weaving artistry and ethical marketing to come alive online. Through a bold edge and fresh perspective, she elevates the voices of visionary thought leaders to create unparalleled brands and businesses. I'm so excited to dive into this episode, so let's get stuck in. Hey, Allison, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here today.
Yay! Me too. I feel like this whole topic about like spiritual solopreneurship, feminine business, it feels really alive for so many people that I know, like, and so many people in the audience as well of this show, so many people who listen they're so talented and have so much to offer. And yet, being on this journey of like bringing our gifts out into the world and having them reach who we want to reach it's a really big topic. So I'm really excited for us to dive in today.
Me too. It's really important to me as well because, like you said, I feel like, especially there's so many incredible female healers and, mentors, and the topic around feminine-led business, but also like, the sustainability and, marketing in an ethical way can be a very tricky dance and something I'm really just feels very alive for me that I'm passionate about. So I'm excited to just dive in and deepen into this conversation.
Yay, amazing. And, this is actually the first episode that's about business at all, which is really exciting.
I feel so honored.
I'm so thrilled to have you. Honestly, it's so exciting. And I love how we're like similar age. We have a pretty similar background in that I think like we were both exposed to spirituality quite young and have, like created these, like spiritual businesses. Kind of. I mean, yours is definitely more like, based in biz and like helping spiritual entrepreneurs. But of course, like you yourself are a spiritual entrepreneur. And when we met, like just for context, Allison and I met up in London about a month ago. And like when we met in person, I could really feel like how feminine you are. Like how like fun and soft and playful and feminine you are. And I'm just like particularly interested to have these conversations about business with really feminine women because that balance is really challenging. So I can't wait to ask you all about that.
Oh, I love that. It's always funny too because I always have people that meet me that say that. They're like, you're just so organized. And like when I see you market and like do your offers, like I always admire it. And then when you meet you, you're just like such a soft, squishy little human. And I'm like, I have so many people tell me that. Like my best friend always is like, you're so squishy and soft, but you also like get a lot of shit done, and it kind of blows my mind. And I'm excited to talk about that because I think that that's really been important for me. Of just like you can be like a soft, squishy little, woman, and also like a devotional woman, and then also the like on the other side of that, like what does that look like in business too? So thank you for that reflection. I appreciate that deeply.
You're so welcome. I mean, it just is you, it's the truth. So Allison, I'm super curious about like your own journey in business. Like how has that been for you, and how have you arrived to this place today?
Yeah. So the first iteration of my business, I went to school for Ayurvedic medicine. And I always like to start off with that background of just a little bit of my background and context, because I think that gives kind of the landscape or the journey of like, I'm not just someone that teaches about marketing that's actually never had a spiritual business. Because I think that can be often sometimes what happens with like business coaches, that they've only sold kind of like money promises. And it's just a different, it's a different thing when you haven't actually been in another realm of things. So I started in Ayurvedic medicine, and the reason why I was drawn to Ayurvedic medicine is, like you mentioned, I had a very kind of spiritual upbringing. Part of my lineage on one of my family sides is my uncle is an ayahuasca shaman. So I started participating in ayahuasca ceremonies when I was 15, attending them from like when I was 11, and then moved to Mexico around 16 and was there for a year doing my school online, doing plant dietas on, and when I like had break, yeah, and like going to ayahuasca ceremonies, and then, like doing my math 10 homework, a few days later.
No,
So
wild.
yeah, wild, yeah, wild upbringing. And I think that because I was really, I think, lucky in that way, of just being in community of like real, like legit shamans and Chinese medicine practitioners and doulas and midwives. So a lot of my like friends were, while I was 16, were like in their 40s, 30s, like these mature adults that were just like gifting me teachings. And I'm really grateful. I just want to say to my mother for like allowing me to do that. Cause I think now if I was a mother and my 16-year-old is like, I desire to go live in the jungle and do my schoolwork there. She had a lot of trust and like trusted my journey in life. So that was such a great foundation. And I kind of journeyed into Ayurvedic medicine after I graduated high school, as I think just the understanding of like how plant medicines were so important to me, but really the mind-body connection. So the first iteration of my business was working with women with burnout, specifically through an Ayurvedic approach. And then I started seeing that so much of women's stress was related to the female reproduction system. So then I did more trainings and like into trauma integration specifically that was related to the womb, and then shifted kind of my business to feminine embodiment and womb healing. And I had this signature course called Womb Alchemy that I think there was like 5 rounds of it and sold out. And then, had a signature feminine led business course where we worked through like feminine archetypes, and polarity teachings, kind of before it was trendy too. Like, I feel like before it was like a huge thing. I was there first. So, and then I kind of shifted out of that. I think like a lot of people, when the pandemic hit, I think and everyone in some shape, way, or form had a switch or reflection, and I took 2 years off. I remember like I was in the middle of launching this it was called Radiant Leadership Academy, and it was all feminine led business. So I was starting to kind of venture into business then, and I had people signed up, and I just got this intuitive hit that I was meant to refund everyone and to close it, and just to like, I was in this void space for like 2 years. I entered into, there's like lots of things that happened, and the details don't really matter except, just a lot of undoing and unbecoming and becoming. And then eventually after 2 years, I ran out of savings. So I was like, am I going to become I think I almost became a dental hygienist, because I was like, I don't even want to be in the coaching space anymore. I think it's like so random. And I was like,
I get it.
Yeah,
I get
right?
it can be exhausting, like to constantly like hunt our shadows, like while we're trying to serve and be in our purpose, because that's what entrepreneurship is, especially for like deep spiritual women.
Yeah, it's so, you're sensitive. And then also the content creation, I was like, I'm just going to be a dental hygienist. Like that's what I'm going to do. Which ended up did not happening, obviously. And it was really interesting, just this series of events. I was like, well, what did I like about business? And I was like, well, I really like the social media aspect. I think that's what I was specifically doing business coaching kind of at the later stages, at the kind of late end before I closed all the containers. And I was like, I don't actually specifically like just business coaching. I really like the marketing piece of it more so. And I just have this real knack for like bringing in like the intangible experiences into a tangible way that makes sense for people, but still honors like the essence of it and doesn't water it down. So I started doing social media management and was hired onto a really, a big name in the industry. She's a really big name in the human design Gene Keys world. And I was the creative director and operations manager for her whole team. And it was crazy because the day before she hired me, I put this amount in of like, this is the amount that I want a month. And if I, don't find this within my social media clients, like I'll just get another, like a 9 to 5 or something like that. And I've never actually had a 9 to 5. So that was kind of new territory as well. And she said the exact number, and it was like very specific. It wasn't just like, 5,000. It was like intricate number. I forget what it was now. I think it was like, 4,236, or like, there was just like a very specific number, and she said it. And I just kind of was like, okay, God wants me to be working in this way with social media, creative directing. And then I was doing a lot of social media management for people. I ended up then running a marketing agency, doing a lot of creative direction work, doing copywriting services. And it was really what I needed at the time because I wasn't ready to interact with the coaching space. I was still in this dance of it. And I didn't want any pressure of launching or creating. So while I was doing that, I also didn't ever really market my social media services. I just had a lot of referrals, and it came very naturally. It was like very energetic. So there was something to that. I think I maybe, posted a few times, but it wasn't like it was just kind of this magical thing that was happening. And then I started noticing that I was like, I started to kind of develop this relationship with social media through kind of trial and error and playing and testing of like, this can be really actually empowering and playful, and it doesn't have to be so stressful. And I got this intuitive download. I think it was right around the time last year in July, when I decided to be nomadic. I was like, I'm going to open up one-on-one spaces. I'm going to open up a marketing program. And for anyone that knows me really personally, they know I don't really plan out launches too much. I get the intuitive hit. Like I feel the energy of when they're coming, but it's not like this is the release date of the launch. It's more so it's always in the car. So at this time I was like in the car in a ferry lineup, and I was like, okay, I'm doing this course. No branding done, no sales page, just a clear message, 5 signups within an hour. I was like, okay, there's something to this. And it's always been that way for me. Like Nourished Leadership, my business and leadership program, this round I think my partner was driving in Scotland, got the hit, decided to like follow the energy, put some Instagram stories out, 3 people in within a few days. So then I started realizing, doing marketing programs for people, working one-on-one with people in this kind of like messaging marketing capacity, doing kind of consultancy, phasing out the like do for you work. Like I still do some of that, but only in a different capacity. And I started bridging like the messaging and the foundations and all the things that you want for sustainable, successful, like consistent cash flow, consistent clients, but with like embodiment and somatics, and just like I think what people really crave when we're deeply spiritual is like bringing back kind of the sacredness to how we approach social media. And people really were responding. And I think now that was kind of 2022, and I think this year has really been I think just, not that I didn't realize before, but it was like, there's something really special about the way that I approach things. And I really have heard that feedback a lot of like, I've signed up for so many marketing courses. I've signed up for so many business courses, and it's either all energetics and I still don't know what I'm doing and how to show up, or it's so action oriented that it's like squeezes all my life force. And I started realizing, I just think the way that I am like organized and structured and like that is so me, and like bringing tangible things, but also still so deeply spiritual because of my background. where people were getting a lot of results, but also not even necessarily about the results, because that's never my big thing of the way that I market. It's more like the way that it feels. And I think that that's what spiritual heart-led women really care about. Is like, okay, yeah, there obviously is a desire, for financial abundance, but if it's not in alignment or congruence with like how it feels in our bodies, I've always been like, what's the point, So that's kind of the journey of where I'm at now.
Yay. I just love that piece that you brought in about like, yeah, how does it feel? Like, why do we really want the money? Do we want to feel safe? Do we want to feel freedom? Want to feel, yeah, it's like the joy of just being able to do what we want with that money. It's like, what's the feeling that we're looking for? And like, I ask myself that a lot when I'm asking myself about money. And yeah, so I think it's really beautiful. And now I think you've just started running a program, right, called Nourished Leadership, which feels very congruent.
So congruent.
It's so congruent. I was like, wait, maybe I should be in this program. It's like, hold on.
It's well, I think that I think the name, from what I've noticed, really speaks to women. And yeah, I've started running that because before it's the second time it's run, and then I've run the marketing course, which are kind of two signature offers. But I think I started noticing like, okay, people love the marketing course, but then I always get questions around like offering, pricing, like the big picture business stuff. And I was like, well, I can't answer all of this because it's also not in scope, but also like there needs to be like a longer period. And I just kept on hearing, it's like, I love the way that you approach business. And I think because from when people experience my containers, there's a lot of like, I'll always give feedback, I'll always give direction. And there's also lots of spaciousness of like coming back to your own inner wisdom of how you feel things are meant to be. Because I think that can also be an experience, in my experience too, sometimes of like, okay, so you're going to have just this kind of one offer, and then you need to have this, and then you need this. And I know as someone that really resonates with being an artist and a creative, as soon as someone tells me that something needs to be done in a certain way, I'm like, that's not happening. I'm going to do things my own way. So I think because also of all these different backgrounds of doing it in so many different ways for so many years, I know a lot of the routes to help people get the avenue or like, receive that desired outcome, and also have like not impose what I think their business needs to look like. Like there'll be guiding direction, but also I think what's really important is someone's body base knowing at the center of marketing, messaging, and just the overall foundation of how people lead.
Yes. I love the way you bring in like artistry into this, and it makes so much sense. It's like, yes, you're a creative. I'm also a creative, and I love this part of my business. Like I love all the like, yeah, the creation and the like making beautiful graphics. Like I found so much joy in like not only being able to do my work, but also like do it in the style that I want to do it in. Like that brings me so much joy.
Yeah, there's a real beauty in it. And like you said, like the artistry is it's very feminine, right? Like and that's what I also noticed too, of like there needs to be artistry for us to feel fulfilled in our work, and like the way that like the things that we're creating, but also it's like the way that we approach business, and that's why I always remind people like it's like nourishing the woman first and then the business, like, kind of the business archetype or whatever you want to call it. I like leadership rather because I feel like you said, the kind of almost like, I think people can get really stuck in like the boss babe archetype and what they think that needs to look like as a leader. And Yeah, like I always say, it's like, I'm an artist first before I'm a business owner. Like, that's how I really relate to things. And it also, I think, allows more spaciousness for us to create business models that actually are going to be in service to the way that we create, the way that we honor our cyclic nature, and like move through seasons, rather than this like very like, this is what you do, this is what you do, and okay, now we're going to have this launch plan and all this stuff. And guidelines and directions and plans are great. And also, if there's not room for the artistry, I think, in my experience, it's like the creative life force really just is dry, and then we don't feel magnetic. And I think that's when we're like, should I just go be a dental hygienist?
Too good.
In my case, no. But, we all have those thoughts.
Totally. Totally. And you know what? Like, I just want to say, like, I'm all for spiritual entrepreneurship, 100%. And I also feel like it's so legit to go and get a job and like do it on the side, because I'm like, hell yeah, stability, hell yeah, grounding. And
Yes.
like, I've been quite fortunate in my business in that, like, I've mostly had consistent income, even though like I have not been hitting these like massive numbers. Like, that's never been me and my business so far. Fingers crossed.
It's gonna happen. It's happening in its own timeline.
Yeah, but like I can't imagine being in a situation of like needing to pay rent and being like, where is this money gonna come from? I've been really like close to that. I have experienced that in some ways, but just it's like the level of stress that creates is like, oh my God, if anyone's in that position, it's like there's no shame at all in like getting a job,
No. I always recommend to clients too that don't have consistent income yet, or have savings that are maybe like a cushion. I'm like, get a part-time job to at least have like, at least basic needs covered. Because I've seen it happen so many times. I've also been in, masterminds and programs where, coaches will be like, be all in, quit your job. And I just go, because some people's nervous systems do really well with that pressure, but I think majority of people don't. And I think that sometimes, I think that there has been a slight distortion of like what a quantum leap is. And you can be all in on your business and also titrate your system to like slowly move into that. Because it's not just, okay, receive clients. It's like putting yourself out there. It's like having the safety to receive money. Like it's building brand awareness. And I think that sometimes the advice that's given is, it's almost like forgotten that certain advice when you're at the beginning stages and you're not making consistent income is actually should be very different from maybe than when you're like, past a certain level of income. It's a whole different energy. So sometimes there can be a lot of distance from it. But I've always been an advocate of like clients or friends or even just myself of like, have basic needs covered, because if you're stressed about money and then you're putting the energy of trying to get something from your audience, people can feel that you're not going to be as open because you're going to be so stressed. And, there's nothing wrong with like titrating your body to like slowly move into this like safety of receivership with money and clients. And just, business is kind of wild sometimes. So it is. It's wild. I was going to say it's like the Wild West sometimes, because especially if you're not used to it and you don't have like maybe not as seasoned of like knowing those ebbs and flows of just going through, because there can be lots of things. So it can be, and I feel like what saddens me about that pattern too, what I see in the industry is like, then people think that they're just not cut out for it and they're not meant to share their gifts. And it's like, no, babe, just go just have some income coming in. Like we need, like people want your gifts. And then they can create this whole story of like, maybe this isn't meant for me. Maybe I'm not meant to do it. And I think that, like you mentioned, if there's stability and there's at least that form of safety of income coming in, it can really soften that, mind chatter.
Totally, totally. And, like one of my pet peeves in the coaching industry is kind of, like experiencing coaches who, they just like put themselves out there and then straight away it's like everyone is obsessed with them and they're making so much money. And, it's just my experience has been that is not the reality for me and for most of the people that I know. And I feel like it can be a little bit of a rude awakening.
Yeah, it can.
And it can feel a little bit like, oh my God, is there something wrong with me? And yeah, like I'm not meant to do this work because not everyone's obsessed with me. Like from the first time I've showed up, it's like, oh my gosh, no, it is not like that's
No.
not how it is at all. And the journey of entrepreneurship, like it's not for the faint of heart. Like you've got to be the one who keeps picking yourself back up, I was
It's
having a
so
conversation.
true.
Yeah. Yeah, like I was having a conversation with my mum last night, and I'm living at home at the moment. So I'm around my parents a lot, and they're very curious about my work and about what's going on. And, obviously that they want to see me out with a mortgage and a husband. And I'm like, why are you home? But anyway, I was like telling my mum, and I was kind of sharing with her like about some of the blocks that I'm having at the moment. And she was like, why don't you just quit? Why don't you just quit? And I was like, no, because if entrepreneurship and being my own boss was something that was easy, everyone would do it. Right? It's like everyone would do it. And I feel like it takes determination and it takes passion and it takes resilience. And yeah, like we were saying a little bit before we got on this call, like I'm finding when I'm really in my like focused biz mode, I'm really like glued to my laptop. And I get into this energy where like it's really hard to take proper breaks, to make sure I'm taking care of myself, and to, just like balance the masculine and like my own masculine and feminine energy. And so that's why I think it's so amazing that you've got this experience of working through Ayurveda with burnout. Because I feel like that's also another challenge on the journey, is like how to really go all in, like to be really focused and to be really present and not burn out.
Yeah, there's I love that you mentioned the resilience piece. And I think there's also the piece about devotion too in there, where it's like, devotion, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But there is something to be said about like, are you fully devoted but unattached also to like your timeline of what it needs to be? Or if I think about this relationship, when you kind of enter a relationship, yeah, you could hold a vision that like you want to marry the person you're in relationship with, but there also needs to be a level of like an attachment of like projection of, is that, instead of like, is he the one or is she the one? And it's like, you could hold a vision that maybe it is, or that you want to get married, but also the unattachment, but you're devoted, right? You're devoted to the relationship, you're devoted to the vision, but it's not necessarily projected on a certain timeline or even a certain person. And then when it kind of comes to, burnout, like, I will say when I was like, I think more so doing the marketing agency, I was definitely more burnt out, and it's just just such a different level of business, or just like such different scopes of business than coaching. But one thing I hear all the time from women is like, yeah, how do you have like almost like a luscious hustle, but then still like remain soft? And not necessarily them asking me, but just like the question of, I think what on a lot of women's hearts and minds. And I think my experience with this is like, one, they're it's kind of conceptual, and then it also is like a practice. And there's a few things that have kind of helped me start discerning is, one, I started really asking myself, like, is this, I found that sometimes when I was avoiding certain tasks in my business, it was actually sometimes what caused more burnout. And yeah.
Like, why do these things weigh so much on our consciousness? One thing. Oh.
And so I started asking myself, like, when I felt that energy, I was like, is this avoidance, or is this actually my feminine flow of like wanting to rest? And it was really enlightening actually answering those things for myself. And I started noticing a lot of what I perceived as my feminine flow is actually some avoidance of tasks. And now I have rules with myself, or just like devotions or commitments with myself. When I feel those things, I call them energy leaks. Like if I have like a lot of pending actions, because of how energetic I'm holding them, of course they're going to make me more tired. And then I'm going to want to be like, oh, I need to rest more. And then if I rest more, then I'm going to have the energy to do them. So I started, there's like productivity tasks that I think are helpful, of just like setting a timer for 20 minutes. And I was like, oh, wow, 3 of those emails that I needed to do actually just took like 10 minutes. Those are like so off my plate. Because I think that sometimes when it comes to like actions, and this is kind of like the more tangible thing, is what I've noticed is there's what feels overwhelming is actually the big vision of it. Because we're thinking of like, oh my God, there's so much to do. And we're just making kind of it in our minds of how hard it's going to be. And what I love to start doing is like, well, what's the smallest doable task? Like, for example, if I was to, maybe it's posting on stories, like what's the smallest doable task? Okay, so how can I start breaking that down instead of like this whole daunting thing? And I noticed that even yesterday, I had like a really big kind of work day, lots of calls, with also like a little bit of a heavier, like, oh, I need to get some things done. And I always notice my energy when I'm starting to project, like, this is going to be so hard. This is going to be so tiring. I'm going to be so exhausted. And I notice how sometimes I start to project actually what it's going to feel like. And then I also play with like, well, how can I make this task more pleasurable? And how can I maybe break it down into simpler ways? So sometimes that looks like putting on certain music, or I actually get a lot of work done at nice fancy restaurants, which is hilarious. I'll like go to like, I'll like just have like appetizer and a dinner and a dessert, and I will like write content, and like it's such a vibe, because I know for my particular energy, like I get really inspired by environments. So if I'm feeling stuck in an environment, I'm like, I'm just gonna feel luxurious and do this in a pleasurable way somewhere else. I don't do that every dinner, because I also like to be present during dinner, but sometimes I will like just use those little things that are like, how can I make this more pleasurable? And then I think also the thing with burnout is this is such a dance between, this is such like a complex, nuanced topic. But I think one of the things that I realized that was actually burning me out is that I can't just rely on how good I feel to run my business, because also, because then it was like this cycle of like, okay, now there's no money coming in, but that was kind of my responsibility because I wasn't posting about my offers. Okay, my business isn't where I need it to be. Well, I haven't been showing up, so I kind of started realizing like really, really deepening into like clear, like being like a ninja with my energetic and embodiment practices of like, this is my responsibility to clean up. And that's not to say that I don't give myself spacious rest periods when shit is going on, but it also made me see that I had a gap in the way that my business was kind of structured, the way that I was using a lot of perfectionism of like why I couldn't post and like all of those things. And the way that I always share with clients is like, I think that the thing that we desire, right? The spaciousness, we kind of avoid the structures, we avoid those pieces in business because we think it's going to take from our energy. And it's really more so that we just have resistance to doing something new where it actually, in the long term, gives so much more spaciousness. Like I think now back to the like now or experiencing now, I'm living in Barcelona. I have multiple clients. There's multiple programs going on. And yet I still have space to like read all afternoon and go like have a tea ceremony with myself and like, with two hours of work. So like, obviously this is very individual, but I think one, it comes with the business model. One, it is really being honest about like what structures to support yourself. And then there's also the self-responsibility of, what is the vision that you want to create and, the spacious lifestyle. And it doesn't have to be like the boss babe empire. Like, I don't know if I necessarily resonate with that. I don't necessarily like want an empire, but I know I also knew that I wanted the spacious abundance so that I could like every month feel the relaxation of monthly reoccurring revenue while still being able to like feel, just like feel in my body. So I think that there's so much nuance because every business model is going to be different. But I think the thing is really looking at where we're resisting, kind of like how I kind of frame it with clients is like, there's a big energetic difference if you're holding the business of like, okay, what do I do next? And okay, now I need to launch. Okay, now there's no clients and scrambling. It's like, it's very chaotic and feminine. It's kind of disordered. Whereas like when we start bringing in the kind of masculine energy, it's like the business starts holding us in our energy rather than us holding all of these pieces and us just leading with like the constant, just fully leading with like how great our energy feels. Cause you can make sales when you're not feeling well. You can make sales when like your energy is off. And obviously there is something to be said when we feel more radiant. I think that there can be like an easier flow, but I think that, there's so much nuance, like I said, so I'll pause there.
Oh my gosh, I'm just so impressed by you, Allison, honestly. You're like perfectly in the middle of girl boss and girl moss.
Yeah, I love that so much.
Change bio immediately.
Yeah, I'm like, we want to be making, financial, have financial abundance, but also be laying in beds of moss, like on a reading books. I'm like, that's my ideal day.
Oh my God. Totally. It's amazing. Yeah, you're such a little elf fairy.
Yeah, definitely.
Little elf fairy, but then also like really rocking it in business, and it's so inspiring.
Thank you.
It's so
I appreciate
inspiring.
it.
And yeah, I'm curious, like, something that we kind of touched on a little bit before, and something that I meet so often is like, I'm a very scorpionic being. I work with sexuality and soul work, and it's all about deep processes and healing. And I find that, like, in my own business, in my own work, all of that stuff, like all of my own stuff around doing the work, can feel so overwhelming sometimes. Like, the thing of being seen, this has been so huge. And like, I'm doing this podcast now. So like, I'm pretty comfortable with podcasting. I definitely still have my edges for sure. Definitely things that I still feel self-conscious about. But then I'll have like this other thing that like I haven't done before that I feel super intimidated by, like lives. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I never do the lives. But I know because I started a podcast that like just doing it is the only way to really get over the fear. Is like just doing it and accepting that it's gonna like maybe suck a little bit at the beginning.
Yes.
But people are still gonna love me.
Yeah, this is such a big thing, you know, and especially when it's not like we're selling sponges or like
Yeah, with a
selling,
face.
yeah, we're you know, when you have a personal brand and it's a personal story, and oftentimes in this space, it relates to like your own personal healing journey. So there it is, like it's very vulnerable. And I always like to see it's like, I love that you said like be seen, because I think there's a lot of talk around like get more visible, and it's like it's visibility, and then it's like being seen, and then it's almost like being felt. Like I think that those are the layers of it, and they're all very intimate, which I think really relates. And I think that it's great that your this podcast is really like a sexual, like there's been a lot of sexuality topics and intimacy as it's relationship, right? It's intimacy work. Really, how I relate to marketing is. You know, there's a very intimate process of like the people that we're being in relationship with, you know, in our community spaces. And they're, like you said, it's like, it is almost kind of just doing it, right? It's like taking the action. And I think that's why, you know, nervous system work is really important. Embodiment work is really important. Getting to the root of like our fear being like rejected and being misunderstood, and that like really root chakra feeling of like, I'm going to get canceled. Like people are going to hate what I have to say. It can be a lot on the nervous system. And I always share, it's like I think it's more emotional alchemy work than anything. Of like, that's why I always pair embodiment work with messaging focus. Like I don't think that you can have one without the other, because if I told you like, okay, so this is what you're going to do to create more eyes on your content, and like it's going to be like, okay, great, but I'm really afraid of, you know, I always say this is like, this theme has been coming up this week with a lot of my one-on-one clients is like, what's your bold perspective? Like, what are the things that you're not saying? That's your moneymaker. Like, though, that's what's going to call in the elevated client. And then there's this fear I often, well, like, what if my audience is mad that I'm like starting to have this like new perspective, right? Like, what if I upset people? Like, very people pleaser. Like, you know, I want to make everyone okay. And, you know, what I share with people is like, just like in relationship, like we evolve, right? So yeah, there might be people that don't resonate as much anymore, but think about all the people that are going to come in and be like, thank God she's speaking to this, or this is exactly what I've been thinking or resonate with. And, you know, I think the most influential people that I look up to, or like, that's why I really relate everything to like artistry and creativity. It's like it's for me, like my methodology is like creativity, artists, you know, artistry kind of in one, and then embodiment and strategy. I really feel like you need all of those pieces. And when we relate to art, and this is why I love speaking to like artistry and creativity, is just like, even through the lens of how we can look at it, marketing, there in art, there's like this acceptance of like, it can be a masterpiece in someone's eyes, and it can be like the shittiest piece of art they've ever seen. Like, it really reminds me of, have you ever seen that like art piece where it's like a banana duct tape on the wall?
No.
It sold for $1 million. And like, that's not my taste. Like, I'd be like,
Really?
yeah, like I could have done that, right? I could have done that, but someone bought that. And I'm like, well, who am I to judge? And even if I have a judgment, or I'm like, that's not my taste, it doesn't mean anyone else is wrong or the artist is wrong. And this is where I started just bringing this perspective of like, when I am creating, I'm like, it's all just art to me. And there's like, yes, I have a desired outcome because it's also business. But when I'm like in my creativity and just like, also honoring this like creative genius that it's like, okay, it is part of my story, but it's also not about me. It's like, yes, it's my medicine, it's my gifts, but it's also this, this piece that's almost bigger than me that's channeling through, and like my responsibility is to be of service. And if people don't resonate with it, that's okay. You know, I've experienced where I start to get a bit bolder. I start maybe sharing perspectives that are a little spicier or just, you know, more embodied in my voice. I really noticed that this year is like really more dropped into like speaking from my womb, and how that translated with the things that I was saying around content and marketing. And, you know, I at least get like 150 unfollows a month. Like it's very regular for me. It's like a very slow growth. And I also have had the highest months in the past 3 months, and I've had so many unfollows. And I'm like, that goes to show me, it's like, okay, so the people that are unfollowing, that don't like what I have to say, like, thank you for making space, because the people that are like a yes, that are like resonating with my perspective, they're buying. And that's what I care about. You know, I think there can be such a focus on the vanity of it, but I'm like, that's not what I'm focused on. I'm focused on speaking to the elevated client that, you know, and we can't do that when we're watering down our message. So I think that that's what really is like, what reminds me is like being in devotion to the service. And yet, and then, you know, pairing it like, okay, I am human and sometimes I get my feelings hurt. And then that's when we do the emotional alchemy, right? Of like, ooh, that hurt my feelings a bit. And then I also come back to like, you know, then I think it's just a space to heal and integrate, and, you know, we can titrate after and take care of ourselves. But I think it's a balance of like the devotion and taking action, and then really also being in our practice of doing our integration work of not projecting the validation from our audience, because it's actually no one's else's responsibility to like us.
Oh my God, this is so real. I have to remind myself of this. I really do.
It's a hard one because it's like you're sharing your art. It's kind of like, you know, when you're a little girl or like when you're a little one and you like make a, you know, you come home and you like show a piece of art, you want your parents to celebrate you and be like, wow, that's fantastic. And it kind of feels like, everyone look at my picture. No one likes it. Why doesn't anyone like it? It totally feels like that. It's like,
Yeah.
I just spent hours creating this piece and there's been no comments. No one's told me this is the best thing that they've read. And it's like, that's when I think it's like the inner child that like made this like weird macaroni piece that no one really knows what it is. And then it's like, she just wants to be seen. She just wants to be loved up on. And then that's our responsibility. And I find that when we start, in my experience and what I've noticed with my clients is like, when we kind of start clearing that energy, it's less transmuted in how we're communicating, because we communicate right through physical words in our content, whether you're speaking them out loud or writing them. And then there's also like an energetic communication that happens. And both, you know, there can be distortions in the energetics if it's like, okay, but I want to post this so that I know that I am meant to be a leader and everyone's telling me, because you know, if you're in business for long enough, someone's going to be upset at some time. Like, you know, if someone is going to be upset at some point with either if it's a comment or a client experience or some misunderstanding, like it's going to happen. So if something happens and you're trying to control the environment where only people are happy with you, I don't think you're like, it's not like, I don't think that in my experience, there's a bigness that God invites us to play. And that's like the real intimacy of like, here's my heart, here's my medicine, and here's the art. And it's okay if you misunderstand it. And I can really regulate myself in that. And also, if it is actual real feedback, like if you've done actual harm, then also having the integrity to clean that shit up. But this is where I think that leadership muscle is really, you know, like you said, it's not for the faint of heart because we can't please everyone. And it's really like a leadership muscle that is strengthened, I think, when you've been at it and you've been exposed to so many experiences of like taking the feedback, but it's discernment. And then also just like really coming to like that heart-centered place of knowing our intentions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like accepting that we're going to be misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're going to be misunderstood. We're not going to be everyone's cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, wow, it's just like listening to you. I'm just like, yeah, I really want to acknowledge like how much of a trip this is. It's
It's
such a trip. It requires so much, and I really feel like anyone who's on this path and who's really choosing to have their own business, especially if it's like a holistic, spiritual business, it's so brave. Brave. And yeah, I feel like this piece around really coming back to service whenever we kind of like get into our egos, because like it happens so many times a day for me that I like get in my ego of something, and then I'm like, wow, like this is actually not about me right now, even though it really feels like it's about me.
it's
It's
such a
not.
dance. It's really hard sometimes to decipher of like, this isn't about me, but it feels really personal. But I think the one thing is like, even if someone was like, wow, this was the shittiest thing I've ever read, it really isn't about us. It's like, okay, we triggered them. There's, and it hurts, right? It's such a dance. And that's why I feel like, especially with marketing, because it's so much, that's why I think why I do a lot of creativity practices with my clients. Like, we're working on creativity with content, but I often always, one-on-one clients, or always in all the containers, encourage them to like have creative practices outside of their businesses. Like, go make some pottery, go make some finger painting, because then you start getting into like, it can be playful, and you start working through creative blocks and seeing how that can also translate into marketing. Because when the pressure is, when we're creating something for marketing, it's like there's like, obviously there's a call to action usually to buy, right? So it can be a little bit different when we're just like, making, pottery, and there's not like, okay, I'm going to go sell this thing now, but it's still a creative practice. So if we can look at it through that lens, it really softens it of like, is this wrong? Is this right? Are people going to like this? And we start just getting to like the practice of it and the truth, and like starting to strengthen like that creative channel that really moves through each of us.
I love that. And it's definitely been part of my like yearly intention this year to be like more in my artistry outside of my work. And yeah, what I have done has been super fun, so nourishing. So there was something that I wanted to ask you, like seeing as we're kind of like in this topic about social media, I feel like so much emphasis is put on numbers and like the amount of followers, the amount of likes, the amount of comments, all of it. And I'm curious, like, what's your feelings on that? Do you feel like having a really big audience is something that really makes a difference?
No, not at all. And I have a really strong stance on this, because when I was doing a lot of social media management for people, I was working with like people with big accounts, like 60,000 followers, 100,000 followers, sometimes 200,000, even like the 20,000 follower range. And I saw a really common thing where it's like they were struggling in business. They were struggling to pay their team. They were struggling to, like, there was such a focus on a lot of them for viral content. And I think there was a post about this that I did last year, so I'll say it again, where I think I fired half of them in December, because I was so tired. A lot of them were so focused on like, we need to go viral, we need more followers. And that's always a strategy. There is obviously, sometimes a nice intention of like wanting to bring a new audience. It is important. And also the tricky thing is when people are just focusing on gaining, and there's not nurturing, what happens is there's not a community. Yeah. And I think it's much more powerful to have like a micro movement, and like that people are that relate to and that value and connect with than like a huge audience. I always find it a little bit of a red flag when like I've had clients and the first thing they say to me is like, I want to go viral. Cause I'm like, one, maybe your business usually doesn't have the infrastructure to even do that. The offers don't make sense. Even if I've also deleted reels that have started going viral for me because I've noticed actually it was bringing in people that weren't a right fit for my services. So there's something to be said is like, are all of those people, the right fit,
Oh my
and
God, totally.
engaged community over anything. And lots of people, I didn't realize this until being at a lot of the back end of people's businesses in the industry, because sometimes I noticed like the engagement was just like so low, and it would be like 60,000 followers, but like maybe 100 views, which is pretty low in that ratio. And I would, just ask like, yeah, so how did you gain so many followers? So many people bought followers too. So there's just so much that happens behind the scenes. And I always instruct people is like, just because someone has a big following does not mean they're successful. It doesn't mean that they, are maybe saying what they do. And that's all I'll kind of say about it. Cause I also don't want to, badmouth because also people do have big followings and they are successful. But there's just a lot. And I think that, I feel like in my experience, I've always had sold out launches, and I have like under 4,000 followers. And I started kind of noticing, I was like, okay, so and my engagement's always been like really high. And I think the key pieces is like, and this is about like brand positioning too, about like, what's the movement that you're creating? For example, for nourished leadership, I kind of like to use this as an example, is I never sold the features of it. I wasn't like, this is how many calls, this is what we're going to do. What really resonated with people, one is I spoke to their desires, but another thing is like, the movement of nourished leadership. Like you can be a soft woman and also be financially abundant. Like this big vision of like a world or a reality of like what I feel is like the next phase of leadership. So when you can create a movement and when you can bring people into a movement, this kind of goes back to art, right? Like when you're listening to music or you're in a museum, it's an experience, like it's a felt experience. And I often think of that with a brand. So when you can create like a similar feel of like bringing people into an experience with you on your page or just your brand in general, it creates a community. And then I also think like, yeah, community engagement over anything. How I kind of discern this is like audience members are kind of people that are like, kind of watching, but maybe, you don't have a relationship with. But what is really big for me is like, I want to be in relationship with a lot of people that are following me. You can't be in relationship to everyone, but I kind of look at, something to muse over as like, where can you create more intimacy? And then for like number things, I do like to play with number goals. Like, I'm like, okay, it'd be fun to, gain 100 followers, to kind of round me up to 4,000 followers. Like, but it's not something that I'm like, it has to be done. It's more so like, oh, I'm going to play with this as an art experiment, or, how would it feel to like create more engagement? Okay, so maybe there's like some real strategy that I can do. So I think it's, people are motivated by different things. And I think if you approach it with play, then it's fine. And it's like, I think the piece around it, whereas like people don't want to sit with the disappointment if they don't reach a number goal. And I think of it as like, well, when you're approaching it from play, it's like, okay, sit with the disappointment, sit with the discomfort, and just play again, and focus on relationship building. I think that's the number one thing is like, they're real human beings. Like, those are real human beings. Like I just had a conversation with a woman. She said no to nourished leadership, and I was like, totally fine. And then a few weeks later, just a few days ago, we were talking about a book that we both liked. And then last night we were like talking about this book on Instagram for like 5 minutes. And I was like, it doesn't matter that she said no to the program. It doesn't matter if she ever buys a program. And it's not to say you have to have all these like conversations and spend so much time talking to everyone, but it's almost just giving the permission of like, or just the reminder of like, there's so many humans, and beyond a transaction, Like, people just want to be heard and felt. And I've always found that a lot of those people that I've just had conversation, oftentimes it's books for me, have ended up buying. I'm really big on reading, so I attract a lot of readers. So I always just end up having personal relationships with people about different things we like, and kind of breaks that barrier. And eventually people buy. It's never something I expect whatsoever, but just a reminder, people are not just like a dollar sign, like they are humans. So bring intimacy exactly how you would in dating. Like, where can you be in deeper relationship? That's kind of how I think of it. So to answer your question, like engaged, intimate community, so much over big, flashy, big, virility in a big audience.
Yay. Yeah, like one of my favorite things is just like DMing my favorite accounts on Instagram. I don't know. I'm really like not shy about that. I'm just like, I'm obsessed with you.
I love it.
It's so nice. And it feels like so good to have an actual relationship like with that person. Like, it's made such a big impact on me actually to experience that, and to also just really appreciate the people in my audience. Like, I love it when people send me messages. Like, I wish the people in my audience wouldn't feel shy to like reach out. So
it's such a nice warm feeling. And I think that's where you can start. Like, if you're wanting more of that, like just think of how you can bring in deeper invitations for them to interact with you in like small ways or have conversations with you. Especially if you're in like the nurturing phase or you don't feel like you have like a hot audience, just create invitations. And that also helps like in the long term of when people feel safe to just message you for whatever reason, people then feel safer to like reach out about a curiosity about a program. Sales is a whole other topic, but I think if it's like with the approach of just like it's a consensual conversation, like the sales conversations become a lot more easeful because someone feels safe to say no.
I love that. Oh, Allison, it's just been so wonderful having you on. I've loved this conversation. It's been so fun to like talk about biz, feminine biz, pleasure-led biz for feminine entrepreneurs. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom. You have so much to share. It's been such a joy. So, where can people find you and what have you got going on at the moment?
So I think the best place to kind of interact with me is definitely Instagram, which will be linked in the show notes. And then I do a lot of like in-depth kind of like marketing advice in my kind of weekly email series. So that's also a good place as well to interact. I think those are the two best places. And then the third round of my signature marketing course is coming out. It's in pre-sale right now. So it's like such a good deal for an 8-week course. It's like 222 for pre-sale, which we'll be raising. So if anyone's interested in the journey of like embodiment work or just resonate with the way that I was talking about marketing and social media, it's a really beautiful journey.
Yeah, I loved some of the things that you shared about marketing when I was in that program. It was so fun. It was like a year ago. And I think that's kind of how we first connected.
It was. It's so, I love that you got so much out of it. And I love that feedback because I've really refined it too. Because I think when you took it, it was a 6-week course and then I expanded it and put a lot more trainings in it now. So I'm happy that you got the juiciness out of it when it was still like a baby.
Yeah, I did. Well, thank you so much, Allison. Sending you a lot of love.
Bye, my love.
You're listening to the Embodied Mystic podcast. Thank you for being here and for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that it could serve you in some way. I'd love to hear from you. My inbox is always open. Let me know what spoke to you in this episode, and if there was a moment that lit you up or brought you into deeper self-reflection. If you loved this episode, I'd be super grateful if you took a moment to leave a review or share with a friend. You can do this easily by visiting the link in the show notes. It's been a real pleasure connecting with you today, and I'll see you soon.